I think all of us produce huge amounts of data every day. We tweet, we post on Facebook, Twitter, post pictures on Instagram and so on. And some of us who are sporty might track our routes and steps with Sport Tracker or other apps. But all this data can be used in creating sustainable cities. But how? Our next speaker is an associate professor of geoinformatics from the University of Helsinki. She's an expert in utilizing big data, and here she is. Welcome, Tuuli Toivonen.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone, as well.
Yeah. So, to conclude, to begin, so here's your name also up here. So, how is user-generated data used for planning sustainable cities, like as a whole?
Yeah, well, there's plenty of different types of user-generated data. So we can think about user-generated data coming from social media, coming from sports applications, but in a way also all the data that is created by mobile phones. And when we use a mobile phone, that leaves a track. So that can be used potentially to be planning sustainable cities. And how it then can happen is maybe especially from the idea that planning can influence only to a certain extent people's behavior, isn't it? So we can plan for fantastic public transportation network, we can plan for nice housing areas, but then how do actually individuals live that environment is up to us. We are not in North Korea. we can do whatever we wish in that planned environment. And of course, the final output of the sustainability of the city in the planned environment comes from the fact how we behave. And then how to understand that. That is the point where user-generated content, spatial data created by all of us can be somehow useful. Of course, it could be also used already to be collecting opinions. Our law, land use law says that opinions of public need to be heard. And there are events, for example, in libraries where plans are being presented and so on, but only certain number of people participate in those events. And then if planners wish to know which are important areas for people, how do they experience them, what are their values on different things, and how do they live the city, as mentioned. So that is a place where user-generated content can be useful.
Yeah. So while thinking about a single social media post, what can you learn from it? Actually, we have a great picture of it.
Yeah. So if we take social media data as one example of user-generated content, so indeed, social media data is often considered to be something very messy, unstructured, chaotic. But actually, if you view it with the right goggles, like geographer's goggles or spatial analyst goggles, so actually you can see that there is some structure. So there is geotag. Often, if people post the post with a geotag, so there's a place mark, location. Then there's also potentially information about the user's social network, some hints about the age, the gender, and so on of the user, potentially the home location, and so on. And then there's the actual time, of course, as well, indicating when the post was made, and then the actual content of the post, either images or text that can somehow tell about, for example, location, experience about that, or then opinions about a certain thing. And that can be used.
Yeah, quite many things actually. But I think that now that technology is always evolving, and I think maybe artificial intelligence can also help analyze these posts, or
Yeah, they can be used. Well, how we've done in our research group is that we've sort of considered social media posts from the perspective that how they could be used to be understanding or answering several different questions. So where people are, when they are in a place, what do they do, what are their opinions, why they are in a certain place, what is the sentiment related to place, and so on. And mining that kind of information, especially if you want to go to the actual content and understand that better, then that requires a bit more advanced technologies. The sort of where and why questions are easy pick. But then analyzing the content like an image like this that you can see there requires artificial intelligence and machine learning. And those technologies have developed during the past years really fast. And there's an example of this, for example, just out of a shelf algorithm. When you insert or input an image like this for the algorithm, what you get out is, for example, information about how many people there are in the picture, what is their gender most likely, what is their age most likely, and so on. And while these go wrong, I'm in the picture and I'm not that old, but still it goes right, like in the magnitude of 10 years roughly. So all of these people who I know are classified just based on their face characteristics by the algorithm to the right 10 years roughly, and the genders are all correct, except for the small boy standing in the front, so he's a boy. So this is a bit like at the same time promising, so we can really mine information from the content of the post, and at the same time it's a bit scary, isn't it? That all of our posts can be analyzed in this way and interpreted in this way just automatically.
Yeah. But while thinking about this picture, I think it looks a bit easy because people are posing and you can see them clearly. But what about if somebody is doing something, like in this picture, there's a woman biking? Are there some applications that you could use for this kind of picture?
Yeah, one of the sort of challenges of using this kind of information as an input for analysis is, of course, how to verbalize this information. So what is in the picture? But those techniques also have developed quite a bit. And again, out-of-a-shelf analysis tool classifies this image or identifies objects from this image in such a way that we can see that there's a woman riding a bike, there's a pink shirt, there's a paved road, there are leaves, and so on. And if we would be, for example, interested in seeing that where are the densities of bikers, or where people are interested in posting about biking, where they are interested in posting about some other activities that are important for the sustainable city development, we could be classifying the content of the posts and then mine the textual content in order to get that kind of information, in order to provide spatially explicit data that has a timestamp, has some sort of reference that what is happening in that place. And that can then be an indication for those who are planning the cities of what is happening where and be used as an input.
Yeah. So let's zoom into your research here in Helsinki. How have you been using user-generated data in your research?
Yep. Well, we have a research lab which has some 15 people, who most of which are working somehow with social media data and other user-generated content like sports application and mobile phone data and so on. And what we have been studying with these data sets is people's mobilities in urban areas, and then use of green areas. So those have been the most important study topics at the moment. And we've done work both in urban regions and then also in more natural environments like national parks, where we have also had a lot of other types of data so that we can have compared the different data sources in such a way that we know if the social media story is the same as the story presented in other types of data. So we have been able to really critically evaluate the stories of social media, both spatially and from the content perspective.
Have you had any results? I think that the pictures people post on social media are always happy and maybe show the better side of us. So
yeah, well, the sentiment analysis of that, like whether you are happy or not, so those are quite challenging, and we are developing those, but a bit cautious. What we have as a result is, and why we are sort of excited yet very critical on these data sources, is that in terms of social media data, for example, we've analyzed Instagram, Twitter, and Flickr, which are all openly available or have been. So what we've seen is that actually if we make questionnaires and surveys and have user counts along pathways and so on, so the story that social media tells is more or less the same, which is quite surprising if you think that social media users tend to be younger than older, they tend to be more women than men, and of course there are also socioeconomic biases between people. Another thing that we've seen, for example, from sports apps is that they are also, of course, very biased. So, for example, Strava, which is a biking application, is typically used by fit young men. And this is important to understand for the reason that if we make conclusions based on certain data source only, then we might be planning the city only for a certain group of people. And that's of course not ideal. And hence being really critical on the data that you use and triangulating data sources that you use is very, very important.
Yeah, now that you mentioned biking, are you using something from the city bike data that there are?
Yes, so we have been also using the city bike data sets to be understanding how people move about and which are the popular destinations and how are the flows going, and currently also working on the sort of who's using the bikes in different areas. There's international research showing that biking is, especially with city bikes, is favoring young, fit adults, and of course then there are some challenges in related to that, how to make biking more appealing for older generations, or if the stations are placed in areas who don't benefit from that, so how to go about with that, and so on. So that is a really important source of information now as the biking system is being developed, both for the city bikes, but also for the like bike lanes and the whole biking infrastructure in the city.
Yeah. Now that we're talking about social media and other kind of things that our smartphones collect from us, I have to ask, because there has been so much conversation about privacy lately because of Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg and so on. So how do you see these things affecting your research? How do you consider privacy issues?
Well, we have been generally interested in overall patterns, so we haven't been interested in individuals as such. So in that sense, we think that it's super good that people are worrying about their privacy, and it should be controlled, as now is happening with the new legislation in Europe. But we suffer from the Cambridge Analytica incident, for example, for the reason that one of our best sources of information for understanding how people use and experience environment has been Instagram. And Instagram has had open programming interface, and we could have analyzed that, but now they have closed all available places to get that data. And then we face a question which is challenging for researchers. Instagram has a website from where you can see all open Instagram posts, like all the other social media posts or platforms. So how do we feel about scraping, so reading that information automatically? That's against the rules, but might be providing important data for sustainable planning, as we think that we are doing good. So should we do wrong in order to produce information which is used for good or not? And this is now where we are at the moment.
Yeah.
So it has changed dramatically, access to data.
Yeah, so you have to think quite a lot. Lots of controversy in that, definitely. Yeah. So what about next steps for your work here in Helsinki?
Well, I suppose we hope to be integrating different data sources. Now we have analyzed them a bit separately. So how I would see is that we would be producing information about people's sustainable ways of living, particularly related to mobility and particularly related to use of green areas, so that we would be combining data from different sources and be able to understand how sustainable our city is, how it develops over time, which are the critical problem points where things don't go as planned, and then how equal is our city for its inhabitants.
Great goals you have ahead, so I wish good luck with your research, and thank you for coming today.
Yeah, thank you.